All right, so we're going to begin with a discussion around the box model. The box model is basically just the idea that everything in CSS is a box, and those boxes have a couple of different properties. If we look at any web page, this one for example on MDN, and I open up my dev tools here, and you've seen this definitely before, as I hover, you can see there's a box around pretty much everything, even things that don't necessarily look like a rectangle. See if I can find an example here. How about one of these icons down here, the Twitter icon? If I hover, we can see there's a box around that, even though it's not actually a box, the thing that's being displayed. But in the mind of the browser, everything is treated as a box, or it has a box around it. And each box has a couple of different properties. You can actually see different colors, right? You can see blue, you can see green, and you can see an orange color. And those each indicate something from the dev tools. So that's just how Chrome displays it. But that shows us that there are different components or different pieces. And in this diagram over here, we can see the core pieces. We have an inner content box where the actual content in an element is, like the text in a paragraph. Then we have something called padding, we have a border, and then we have something called margin. So we're going to talk about all of these different properties because they're essential in laying out our contents, in changing the size of our content, the appearance, the border, the spacing. So we need to understand all of them. And we're going to begin with two that control that inner content box, width and height. So width and height are relatively simple. They do exactly what they sound like. They'll set the width of an element or the height of an element. Now, technically, if we go and read the MDN page for one of them, width, for example, it says by default, it sets the width of the content area. But there's this other property we're going to cover later called box sizing. And if you change it to border box, it will set the width of the border area. Let's ignore that for now. For now, in our box model, in this world, width and height control this part of your element, the inner content area. So I have a new HTML document. It's empty. It looks like this. Beautiful. I'm going to add in, I guess we'll just do divs because we're not really, let's see. Yeah, let's do some lorem ipsum text in there. Lorem, just like that. I'll duplicate that. Maybe 3 of them. 3 divs. So there they are. 3 divs. Beautiful. And good enough for now. If I inspect this, and we look at one of these divs, that blue area right there is the content box itself. It looks like currently it's 859 pixels wide. I don't know if you can see it disappeared, but there's a number there, 859. It's actually just taking up the width of the page, as much of the available space that it can. But I can change that, and I can say each div in my CSS has a width of 200 pixels to start. Now, there are lots of units that we can use here. We still haven't covered things like ems and rems and percentages, but I'm going to use pixels for now until we cover those other units. Now I'm going to refresh. And you can see immediately that these divs are definitely nowhere near as wide or as long. But if I hover over them, you can see that blue area. Don't worry about that orange for now. That blue area right there is the content box. We set the width on it. We restricted it to 200 pixels. So now the content takes up that much space. Or it may take up less space if we had, one word in a div, but that is the width of the content area. So I can do the same thing for the height. I can set a height. How about, let's do something shorter, like 100 pixels and see what happens. And there we go. They're smashing into each other, as you can see. Each div is restricted to be 200 by 100. That's at least the inner content area. But I'll probably do maybe a square, 200 by 200. Okay, so now we have this dead space or just empty space where there's no text, but the width has been set, or the height has been set explicitly, and the width to 200 by 200. So that's width and height. If I give them a background color, we'll do something like background color. I'm going to steal from one of these trendy color palettes, maybe that color right there. Put that in there. You can see that that background color now only goes in that content area, at least with what we have right now. It doesn't go all the way across the page like it would if I hadn't set that, right? We've seen this before, or on an H1, for example, if I have one of those in here, H1, hello. and I give my H1 a background color of pink. That background color goes all the way across, as we can see right there. Even though our text doesn't take up a lot of space, the width of the element goes all the way across. Now I could change that. Width is 100 pixels, a very skinny H1. And now that background color does not go all the way across. Okay, so that's width and height. As I mentioned earlier, there is this caveat we need to come back and talk about with border sizing, or border box and box sizing. And we have to talk about different unit types. But all of these values control the width of that box. And the same thing goes for height.